Howdy of you delicious people, I'm here today to review Blasted. So, here's the interesting thing. So, we have a title and we have a trailer of this movie that is to make us think that this movie is going to be filled to the brim with action. And come to find out, this movie tries to delay and stall and figure out some kind of ways to not really give you that. Plus, when you're going on and thinking that this is a zombie film, because it feels like a zombie film, all of a sudden instead they go on and tell you, oh no, it's not really a zombie film, it's an alien film. So, like, you're not going to get any gore, or you're not going to get any real, legitimate, bloodshed or anything like that. You're going to get some alien goop coming flying at you, and that's all you're going to really get. And I'm just like, okay, I guess that was fun about this movie, but yeah, I just kind of left this movie mostly just feeling bored, and felt like this story wasn't all that original to where I could feel exactly where everything was going. And or there was just a lot of times where I was like, seriously, this is what you're doing with your effing time in this film? Wow, okay. Uh, like, I was so bored in this film. Because in the movie's entirety, there's maybe a solid, couple of, 10-minute times where I'm like, okay, I'm really, I'm in action sequences and I'm really sold with this film. But then all of a sudden they're like, but wait a minute, we're gonna slow it down again. And I'm like, no, let's keep this momentum. Let's keep these action sequences coming. And so yeah, it just, there's 10-minute times where it's like, okay, this is really interesting, but it really comes after we've spent a lot of time doing nothing. And really, when we get to the last 40 minutes, 40, let's be safe, the last 50 minutes of this movie is probably more interesting than the rest of the film. So take that with what you will. But I just thought that this movie was boring, and I thought it clickbaited you into coming into a film that isn't productive enough. So with that said, teeing up, what is this movie about? So, come to find out, we have a guy named Sebastian who is getting married, uh, 3 months after his bachelor party. So that's very weird. So, I don't know why he's. So, Sebastian is to go on and have this bachelor party, but all of a sudden, when Sebastian is to think that his work isn't going to get tied into his fun, all of a sudden we have this guy named Casper who is to not exactly be sold on Sebastian, because he is to be too much focusing on the numbers and not really focusing on why Casper should invest in this guy and if he's going to bore him to death. So Casper's like, well, man, I want some fun bonding experience. Casper wants some kind of adrenaline rush kind of thing. And so Sebastian is going to somehow have to go on and deliver that. Coincidentally, while there is a place that they are going to that is to slowly but surely have a number of people all get possessed by aliens. Because in the beginning of this movie, we set up that there is to be this light that people are to see within this valley that coincidentally they're all going to. And so we have a sheriff or a police officer who is to also be pregnant. And when do you think that the baby's gonna get delivered? a pregnant sheriff. The baby has to somehow like be a thing in this film, right? They have to work that in somehow, right? Yeah. Coincidentally, the sheriff ends up like her water breaks, but they never actually show her having to get like emergency delivered. Like, no, she just eventually goes on by the end of the film and says like, oh, I guess we should go to the hospital now. And I'm like, her water breaks and it's just like hours later, yeah, I guess we should go on, and we should just kind of like, like deliver this baby. Yeah, just uh this movie is just it's tough. It's tough. I would have to go on and just say that there is some slivers of fun in here. That sounds very weird to say. There's some little bits and pieces of fun in here, but you really just have to go through all the stuff that you would don't like from a movie also. And really just the fact that this movie doesn't have enough original things to give you, because it's just trying to be this this sci-fi film, and that's all it cares about. So that's the part of where it struggles. Plus, we have to. So much about this movie has to be uh, so much like the cliche action or sci-fi movie, and so it just tries to stereotypically do so many things that we've seen in so many sci-fi movies before, and because that's all it cares about, sadly enough. So with that said, let's just go into spoilers. This movie was, I'll say that it was just a bad film. Um, it was just an action movie that was a sci-fi action movie that was to kind of clickbait itself, and so there's just no action enough into this. Man, was it just painful to watch. So with that said, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into what of course is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. So I want to be honest also. I'm a little bit far into my day, so to speak. So what you get here is what you get. I'm going to try to do this as best as possible, especially with me just kind of going on and be like, man, I should have gone to sleep. Plus, I honestly, by the end of this movie, I was dozing off just because it's like, man, this movie's boring anyways. And and this movie has an end credit scene. So check out the end credit scene. That there may be a sequel to this. I don't get how, but okay, sure. Yeah. So, blasted. So, we go on and have at the beginning of this them talking about this uh, inexplicable light that people are to have knowledge of, and that possibly they are thinking that aliens were to have landed on this valley. So, because of a number of people who are having the speculation, we have these two women that go off, Stein um, and some girl trying to do this kind of vlog or this camcording thing to try and go on and try to assess what's happening in this cave. So we have one girl being very scientific and the other girl just wanting to uh, kind of like condense the video down and say kind of shorter or briefer things. So the two of these girls go into this cave, and we have the one girl who is to be very much more science-y about things, is to all of a sudden stumble upon this device, and she accidentally is to shoot herself with this device by accident and turn into a possessed alien woman, and is to go on and attack her friend. So that's what kind of starts out the film. We also have one scene where Sebastian is running through the woods and he ends up falling over, making you assume that Sebastian is going to be attacked by some light or some kind of something, which he doesn't actually do. He just gets ending up like splattered with goop. So, transition. So, Sebastian is to go on and be preparing for this presentation at his job, and he's doing this presentation for Casper. So Sebastian is running through all the numbers and this and that. So Sebastian goes on and does this presentation to a guy named Casper, and Sebastian is kind of hitting him with the numbers. So many numbers, he's just flapping out. He's just like, number, and Casper's like, I'm bored. And so Casper has no interest in working with these people. He's almost tempted to leave. And Sebastian's like, well, Casper, like, what do I need to do to just kind of win you over? Because you're rich and I want your money. So Casper is to go on and say, it's like, well, like, you know what? Like, I want like a bonding experience. I, I want to go on and like do something fun and like really get to know you, and instead of so that way I know you and I can trust you with my money, but instead you're just hitting me with numbers. It's kind of very boring and just and why should I care? So Sebastian is rolling in Casper into his bachelor party. And so Sebastian is going on and speaking with Auden, who is to be this kind of very buzzkill kind of guy. And so Sebastian is saying, like, man, we got to go on and like do this bachelor party like to the nines. Like, we got to come up with every like interesting party thing that we can possibly plan. And so now Sebastian is going home, where uh, Josephine is realizing that Sebastian is really to be worried about this whole bachelor party. So Josephine is to mention about some old school newspaper that she found, where supposedly Sebastian and Michael, or Michael, I'm gonna go with Michael because I don't remember what this guy's name was in this movie. So both of them were to be these laser tag champions at one point, and so Sebastian is like, well, yeah, like that was a long time ago, and Josephine is like, well, hey, where's that guy? Like, like that's not the guy I married. So, uh, Sebastian is like, well, yeah, like he's still kind of going on, and like being like that age X amount of years ago. So because come to find out, when Sebastian is confronted with his old friend, he used to say, it's like, hey man, like, you never really grew up. Like, if anything, you're just still going on and drinking slushies and all these kind of things, and like, you've never really grown up. And like, you can't just play like laser tag for the rest of your life. You gotta go on and do other things. Because Sebastian's old friend, Mikkel, is to say, it's like, man, Sebastian, it's like all you care about is your job. Like, even when you're supposed to have fun, like all you care about is your job. So they're kind of bickering back and forth in this movie about this and that. So anyways, so Sebastian goes on with his friends to eventually meet up with Casper, who is to have this like kind of very Whamadine like car that is to have this certain fusion engine thing. And so we have Sebastian that is thinking like, man, we're definitely not going to be able to be like exciting enough for Casper, and he's just going to go and take his unique car and drive his way out of here. So eventually they go on and go to this cabin, and they start playing all these kind of traditional games, uh, like some kind of information. Like it's basically like games that are similar to like a bridal shower, and so they're all very boring. So like they end up doing this like one game to figure out information about Sebastian, and that seemed very boring. So Casper is going like, man, we need to go on and like spice this up somehow. So eventually, whatever they're doing is just not working. So Sebastian is pulling Auden aside and saying like, hey, we need to figure something else out. So Auden is to go on and want for them to go on this kind of tour, and immediately all the guys groan and they're like, no, we don't want to do that. So Sebastian is to see on the back of this pamphlet that there is a possibility for them to go instead to go to this paintball kind of thing and just go on and just do paintball. So everybody's like, yeah, that sounds more exciting. So we have this sheriff in this town. The sheriff in this town, I believe, is Hajordis. Hajordis. Sure. And Hajordis is to be pregnant, and she is to go on and meet up with her father, who is to own this weird UFO store because he owns a lot of assortment of odd things. So Hajordis is to be bickering with her father about this old photo that he has, and so Hajordis is to go on and is to find out that her father owns this radio. So Hajordis is thinking that, well, like she's not quite sure if that is exactly legal. So Hajordis is to go on and deal with her father and eventually just uh, go back and speak with her father because supposedly someone had taken his beer fridge and left all the beer. And so Hajordis is like, okay, I think that is kind of weird. So, because all electronical items start to get taken, and at some point people do go on and start filing reports about like odd uh, certain items getting taken. So, now back in Sebastian and all the guys who are going on this paintball tournament. So, or this paintball thing. So they go to this location where paintball is supposed to be had, and no one's there. So they just decide to like take the equipment on their own and start playing around. And so supposedly Sebastian and Auden are on a team, and we have Mikkel and Casper that are on a team. And so immediately Casper, when everything just starts, he ends up just standing up and he ends up getting pelted with paintballs. I'm like, what a moron! How is it? Why would you ever go on and like be obviously in a paintball thing and not realize when you immediately stand up that you're gonna get pelted? Like, if anything, you should go on and just like crouch all the time and like obviously be covered by some object and then run around. That's the obvious go-to. So Casper gets eliminated quickly, and so Sebastian and Auden are hoping that Mikkel is going to get eliminated quickly so they can just do a reset on here, so that way Casper isn't going to get bored. And so they're thinking already about the next round, and how they're going to try to make things better for Casper to make it more entertaining for him. And so Sebastian is to go on and try to track down where Mikkel is, so he ends up shooting somebody in the head, and so Sebastian thinks that he won. And all of a sudden we instead see Mikkel, who's shooting up Auden, or Audun. And so Sebastian's like, well, wait a minute, who did I just shoot in the head? So they go inside this area to notice that there is these guys who are identical twins, who are only to have us tell the difference between their two hairstyles. One guy is to have a mullet, one guy doesn't. So all of a sudden, one of these twins are to be down and out, and they're thinking like, oh my god, did we kill this guy because we shot him in the eye? So all of a sudden, come to find out that this guy is to wake up and he has green eyes, so he's one of the aliens. He's one of them. So this guy starts attacking the people to the point of him attacking Pell, who's one of the guys in this group, and he ends up getting bitten in the arm. And so he's like, oh my god, like, this guy was a zombie. Am I going to turn into a zombie? It's not a zombie, it's an alien. So, like, this guy could bite Pell all day long. Nothing's going to happen. He's going to be fine. So we go on, and we weirdly have Mikkel, who, because he doesn't have a weapon on him, he ends up eventually going for this Japanese laser tag thing that Mikkel was to show Sebastian the night before. And Mikkel wanted to go and do laser tag, and was to want to like set up like teams, so that way they can Mikkel and Sebastian could eventually practice with these guys and kind of eventually go on and like just kind of play around. So Sebastian and Mikkel, so we eventually have Mikkel, who brings along this laser tag weapon, as eventually some guys are getting the paintball weapon. So we go on and have these guys having to eventually at some point be running around, because at one point or another, what am I saying? They go to this certain, like, I want to say it's like an outpost or like some kind of like location, that they find out that there's a number of dead bodies in this location that they're in. And so they end up falling down these flight of stairs to be in this basement. And so while all these aliens are dumping off these bodies, these guys are just kind of hiding down there to listen what's going on and what's happening. So Sebastian and Mikkel, after they get out of this place, and these guys are to try to blow up the phone tower so that way there isn't any phone service. We have Mikkel, who's explaining to the group that he was to see something that looked very alien, and everybody's kind of looking at Sebastian to confirm this. And Sebastian's like, well, I don't know exactly what I saw. And Mikkel is telling Sebastian, it's like, you know good well in what you saw. And Sebastian's like, well, I'm not quite sure yet, because Sebastian doesn't want to go on and tell guys that he like saw something like that, because they can't they probably wouldn't believe him, or they write him off as crazy. And so like Sebastian is still trying to figure out a way to win over Casper, um, by like not making it have Casper believe that Sebastian is maybe just some loon. So we had Auden, who was to take out this one certain piece to Casper's car, so that way Casper would not be able to go on and be able to use his car. But come to find out, Sebastian and Mikkel are to go back to their car that they took to get here, and the engine is now surprisingly gone. So they're like, okay, I guess we're not going to go very far. So the guys end up running through the forest, eventually at some points going on and finding more green-eyed aliens. So Mikkel, at one point, because he had nothing else to use, is to have fired his laser gun, and come to find out, like, that's the weakness of these things, is to, like, hey, man, like, ditch the paintball, like, let's go on and use these laser guns. So, now that they figured out the weakness of these characters, which is laser guns, which are just like the laser tag laser gun thing, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of obscure, but hey, like, whatever works, whatever interesting thing that you can use to make this even more sci-fi. So these guys are running into the forest, and they're trying to scramble away from these from this villain menace. And so eventually Sebastian and eventually Mikkel make their way to the police office to talk to the sheriff. And so the sheriff, like, that's when the phone dies. And so she's like, well, hey, how about you guys just kind of wait here for my other officer? And so Sebastian and Mikkel are just kind of still bickering about like how they either haven't changed or have changed, blah blah blah, boo-hoo for them. So and that Sebastian is saying that that he is to want to focus so much on his career that he's not going to have fun, yada yada yada. So in that, whatever Sebastian needs to do to win over Casper, he is more than willing to do it. So finally we have Hajord, this is partner that ends up coming into this place with this alien. And so Mikkel, to be safe, is to go on and laser these people, and come to find out the sheriff's partner was to be an alien. And so when this guy comes to, he's back to normal again. And so they end up tying up the other alien and starting to ask him questions. So Mikhail eventually gets tired with this alien, and they aren't really getting much answers from him. So Mikhail just kind of shoots this guy and is done with him. So now that they are starting, like, now that the sheriff believes that this thing is true, and like even her partner was to be like possessed by one of these aliens, so now they're trying to figure out like where is the best place for them to kind of hide out here. And the sheriff is to say that there's only one good spot, and that's at her father's place, her father's store. So the sheriff and the deputy are to go on to the sheriff's father's place. And so that's when, of course, the sheriff and the deputy are to come to find out that there's a whole bus of people that had gotten turned by the girl that was at the cave before and was the first one to get turned in this movie. So, Stein, I believe. So, we now have the sheriff and we have the deputy that are supposed to, like, defend themselves And the most hilarious thing in this movie is when we get to the sheriff going and battling against these aliens, they cut to something else that is not as action sequence. They just basically cut to cut back to boredom, right? So while Sebastian and Mikkel are doing their thing, we have all of the rest of Sebastian's friends that are collectively being taken and put into this vehicle, and we have Casper that is going to mention to these other guys that he doesn't have friends. And I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. This is what you're I don't have friends. And all of a sudden he has a thing fall on his arm and he has to boo-hoo cry about that. And so Pell is to tell Casper, it's like, hey, we're your friends now. Like, we'll be your friends. And I'm like, seriously, this is some garbage that you're just plopping out here. Okay, whatever. All right, sure. Like, whatever you want to do to just eat up some more freaking time here. And then they cut back to eventually, the sheriff, like, just kind of dealing away with a lot of these characters. And I think right as she has to deal with these bus people, that's when her water breaks. And then she's like, oh my god. So after she goes on and deals with all those people, she's like, hey, Dad, I think we should go on and go to the hospital. And that's like towards the real end of the film. So now Sebastian and Mikkel are to go on and get their laser tag equipment on, like their chest things, and like their instead of just normal guns, they end up getting at some point where uh like Sebastian has this uh laser tag rifle. I'm like, okay, that looks pretty sweet. Like, the big massive gun always looks cool in a movie. And so, like, instead of these like little piddly guns that Mikkel is to have, like Sebastian with his massive rifle looks kind of cool. So, and this is about right around like the 50 to 40 minute or 45-minute left of the movie, and here's where we actually get some cool action sequences when they put on the vests, because come to find out, there is like certain gadgets that go on with these chests, or these vests that have like these grenades that these guys can chuck and take down a number of aliens all at the same time. And so weirdly, Sebastian is to notice on these vests that I guess that there is some kind of kill streak, and if you go on and you take somebody down multiple times, then all of a sudden you end up getting this certain specific ability that is to be this kind of light bomb that they aren't able to use until like the very end of the film when they really need it because there's so many aliens around. So we have Sebastian and Mikkel that are guns blazing, and eventually they end up getting surrounded, and they end up deciding like, okay, I think it's time. You go this way, I'll go that way. So they go on and they're starting to do really well, but all of a sudden real guns come into play, and that's when they end up using that light bomb that takes a bunch of them out. So like all the aliens are using like paintballs or real guns and are trying to take Sebastian and Mikkel out. None of it's really working. So eventually we go on and have Sebastian and Mikkel try to figure out where the rest of the aliens are, and they of course are to have been in that cave. So eventually Sebastian and Mikkel make it to this cave. uh, to then uh, try to help out their friends, and their friends are starting to get assimilated to where all of a sudden uh, Auden is to get assimilated within this group. So as Stein is kind of using this machine and powering it up with that fusion engine, so and a number of other items that they found. So we have Casper that is trying to make the play of like, well, hey, like if you guys need this fusion fusion engine to go on and get what you need to do, how about this? How about I go on and I find a bunch of fusion engines for you, and how about you let me go free? And so they're like, yeah, that sounds like a really good deal. So, because he was trying to offer like him and his friends, but then they're like, no, like, do you really think that we're gonna go on and get rid of so many of you? And then he's like, oh, okay, so like, how about you just like free me? And they're like, okay, that sounds reasonable. So we have Casper and we have Mikkel that try to make it to get into this cave, and they're coming up with a plan of attack, but they end up talking so loudly that all the villains can hear exactly what they're saying and what they're going to plan, and so they counter it, and then they just grab these guys and they grab their guns, and they are to now like forcibly have them uh, go on and watch Auden get possessed by an alien. So Sebastian and Mikkel have to come up with an idea of how to take down all these aliens. And all of a sudden, they end up getting this big, massive looking alien. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, there has to be a bigger alien afoot that has to have some kind of CGI, because this is probably Netflix funded, so I'm sure there has to be some kind of CGI department, right? So, we have the whole, like, kill streak coming into play with that vest. And so now Sebastian is to go on and shoot this vest one more time, and then he hits this button, and come to find out this like goes on and blasts this big massive light. And so now the only thing that they still have to deal with is the bigger alien. And so we have Pell, who is kind of pelting this thing with paintballs, and it's not really doing any good. You would have thought that they would have figured out to just kind of continue to pelt it in the eyes, but I guess that's just me, right? So they tried to take this bigger alien down, and it's just not working, no matter what they do. And eventually, what happens, anyways, is the bigger alien just is to go inside of Casper and is to possess him. So I'm assuming if they ever really make a sequel, like they're saying that this alien is going to exist. But I'm probably assuming that this movie is going to do all that well to justify a sequel. But weird things have happened. So we also have Auden, who was to now not be affected by this alien, and so he tries to go on and blast certain aliens and try to get to the bigger alien. And so come to find out, Auden is running to eventually be inside this alien ship that is now taking off from this cave. And so Auden's in there, the girl Stein is in there, and so come to find out in this end credit scene, Stein and Auden are like the last Earth's last defense, and that they're gonna have to go on and try to take down the ship and the aliens inside of it. And so like that's kind of like the, I guess, the sequel that we're never probably gonna get, right? So after Sebastian and Mikkel are to think that they were to have taken all these aliens down, and the sheriff ends up going off and delivering her baby, we have them now queue up 3 months later, and Sebastian has that wedding, and really at the wedding they go on and they're doing laser tag, and so all these like young kids are also doing this laser tag, and so Mikkel is telling like the little kids what to do, to have like some kind of strategy, to just not go in there guns a blazing and hoping that you're going to kind of win the day. So we have Sebastian Mikkel, who I think instead of going on and having Sebastian doing the business that he was doing, instead he's doing a laser tag business. And I guess because of considering how like that really saved them with this alien invasion, and the whole entire time we consistently have Mikkel that's like, oh my god, like, you know what, like, for all the stuff that we're kind of doing right now, like the lasers and like fighting off these aliens, like man, like this would be really great. And Sebastian, why aren't you seeing it as this? And eventually we get to the point where to where now Sebastian is having fun and going on and owning this business with Mikkel. So, but oddly, they just have this weird mannequin that has Adele's face on it, and they're hoping that eventually Auden uh, is to have approved of all the stuff that they were to go on and do. And so that's what gives us that end credit scene. And so yeah, like everybody's gonna go on and do their laser tag, and that's how the movie just kind of ends. So with that said, I really just kind of wanted to rush through the spoilers of this because I'm very tired. But on top of that, it's just like this movie just was not that good. Let me know in the comments below if there was a number of things that I forgot about because it was a rush to just kind of get this done. Um, Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Blasted, whether you thought that it was better than I thought that I think that it still is, to be a thing that isn't that good. But other than that, yeah, just let me know how you felt about this movie, because a lot of people could just go on and be like, no, I feel like you're right on, like I whatever, and they're like, great, because that's the reason why I go on and do reviews, is just to really just have a very honest opinion about a movie. Like, yeah, I know I'm very picky, and I know I'm very like I'll watch everything, but I'm like I'll grade it in a very honest way, because I've seen so many things and I've like because that's the thing I think people don't realize is like I've seen so much stuff, and to go on and say it's like, well, there's a lot of other things that could be better, and you could watch things that are better instead of watching this latest product. Really, for Blasted, that kind of has to really just be it. That you can go and watch a number of things that are about the same or similar, and they're actually pretty amazingly good at some point. So that's it. I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.